and welcome to the new year and to another episode of the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. I'm Philippa Haynes of Insight 101.
And I'm Mark Lee of Bookmark Lee. This is our 44th episode and our 36th interview. Wow.
Indeed. Each week on our podcast, we showcase successful accountants who have been running their own practice for a good few years and who we think can inspire and encourage other accountants in practice around the UK.
We ask them to share their stories, including the highs, the lows, and what they've learned along the way. Our aim is to provide some fundamental insights for you, our loyal listener. And if you'd like to share your story in a similar way, do please get in touch with Philippa or me. We're now taking bookings for March. Wow.
We are, yes, and I've already got somebody for the 13th of March. So that's
wow.
good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's podcast is sponsored by Pinnacle, a trusted outsourcing partner with well over 120 clients across the UK and Ireland. Pinnacle's CEO, Mayank Pandya, is a chartered accountant based in London, and he has a passion to encourage innovation and excellence in the accounting profession. Pinnacle has offices in the UK and offshore delivery centres across India, employing over 250 high-quality staff. With a strong focus on quality assurance, Pinnacle has helped many UK accounting firms to scale their capacity and operations. To find out more, please visit www.pinnacleoss.co.uk. You'll also find a link online wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And also supporting the podcast is the Tax Advice Network, whose website enables accountants to choose specific specialist tax advisors for general tax support or for help across any of over 100 areas of tax. It's free to use, and you can check it out at findataxadvisor.online, where you can also access their weekly tax tips for general practitioner accountants.
Right, so let's get started. Today we are delighted to introduce Dave Burr, an AAT and ATT qualified accountant. Dave runs Carroll Accountants based in Bourne End in Buckinghamshire. The firm is very much focused on serving the hospitality sector, which is unusual. I don't think we've spoken to anybody else like that. Specifically pubs, restaurants and hotels. I think he's also the first licensed trade qualified stock taker we have interviewed, having qualified back in his 20s.
Welcome, Dave. Is there anything else you'd like to add by way of introduction?
No, that's great. And thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
You're blown away by the detail there, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, so we aim to keep the podcast to around 30 minutes and we focus on a few quick key questions. And I think Mark is going to get the ball rolling, Mark, aren't you?
Yeah, so it's a combination question, Dave. How did you come to set up your accounting practice and how did you go about doing it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange story. It was an accident, really. I was working in I've been in accounts all my life, management accounts, and I was running a pub company about 20 years ago, and a director from one of the breweries was on his visiting different people throughout the day, and he visited our offices. He liked how we were running our own bookkeeping and management accounts for our own business. And he actually said, have you ever thought about doing this for anyone else? And I said at the time, God, no, I'm too busy. I couldn't possibly do that. And he said, well, we're putting up a panel of accountants we'd like to recommend you. So have a think about it. And I was in a serviced office at the time. And in the serviced office, there was another accountant who used to do our year end. And I was chatting to him and he said, well, let's do it together, part-time. So, I'll do a bit, you do a bit. Why don't you go back to him? So I did, and it just flew, and it ended up being so busy because we were specialists in the pub trade with my experience and the restaurants, pub and restaurants. And of course, he was a qualified accountant, and together we built this business. I then sold that business about 15 years ago, and 10 years ago, I set up Carroll Accountants, and that's how I got into practice.
Brilliant.
Wow.
I love this sector because I think it's really important if you have that sort of background experience. I've had a previous client in hospitality, and one of the real benefits was that, you know, he understood the kitchen, he understood how it worked, he understood what was coming in and what was going out, and it, there may not, well, maybe construction or something like that, but I think having that experience is so important doing what you do, that I'm sure you were invaluable.
And I think I'd
Yeah,
also
and
add.
also
No, go on, Dave. I think there's a slight time lag. You're hearing us, so if either of us ask you a question, I'll wait till you reply. So go on, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say that I really enjoy the trade as well. So I have a passion for the hospitality trade. So we can really build good advice behind the numbers, you know, because we know the industry inside out. So it does help.
I think that it's so crucial. And when people talk about finding a specialism or a niche or a focus, if you have that combination of the background and experience within that industry and a passion for it, it becomes almost obvious which where to specialize, and you can evidence your value and distinctiveness because of that passion and distinctiveness and experience. And also, you mentioned that this happened by accident. It is astonishing how many of our interviewees have said either they got into accountancy by accident or they started their practice by accident.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very true. I mean, so considering your hospitality, and obviously you got into accounts sort of well, by mistake, as you've said yourself, really. What have you learned along the way? What can we sort of take from it?
So what have I learned about hospitality or about accounts for hospitality?
Just about becoming an accountant and setting up your own practice.
About running your own practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at what I've learned from running my own practice, and you know, you always learn from mistakes, don't you, that you made along the way. And one of the biggest mistakes I've made, and I've spoken to other bookkeepers about this, is I spent too long subcontracting when I first set up the practice for other accountants because it was easy, because the money was coming in, it was a good hourly rate, and therefore took my eye off my practice and didn't put enough of me building the practice because I had some regular stream of income coming in. I did that for too long with Carroll's. I mean, Carroll's have been going 10 years. I would say the first 5 years, I was only part-time in Carroll's. Gemma, my business partner, was running it, and I was part-time. So I wasn't really putting the hospitality passion into the business. It was just running in the background while I was working for other accounts and practices. And I found a lot of bookkeepers are still doing that. And I've spoken to some as well, you know, about taking the plunge and going all out. It's a risk, isn't it? When you've got a nice steady income coming in and a good income as well, it's quite tough to take that jump. But that's one thing I've learned is from mistakes. I should have done that sooner. Definitely.
Yeah. So what impact does it have then? What was the crunch moment that helped you to realise that, you know, you'd done it too long?
I was doing a subcontract for a big chartered accounts firm, top 100 firm in Beaconsfield. And the senior partner there, I got on really well with him, a bit of a mentor for me, to be honest. And it was him that actually said to me about, you know, when are we going to lose you and you're going to go elsewhere? We don't want to. And he offered me a partnership role in their firm or join their firm, and I could become a partner. And it's then I kind of thought, yeah, but why am I not doing this myself? I've got my own business. Why would I want to give it up? But then why am I not doing it? Why am I sort of, you know, so his confidence in me, I suppose, made me think, yeah, actually, why am I not doing this for myself though? And I also head up the hospitality in that firm, and it was a restaurant chain, Yeah, the restaurant chain had done really well, and they're about to sell. So my business there would have gone down a bit anyway. Their need for me would have dropped a bit. So it was that kind of time I thought, I need to go. I need to do this myself. I'm sort of helping them build their hospitality division, while Carroll Accountants, a hospitality specialist, is not building. So it was that kind of conversation with that mentor to do.
I think that's really crucial. First of all, as a mentor, I love hearing about other mentors having a positive impact. But secondly, I think, again, that experience you share is very common amongst bookkeepers and people starting their own practices. They get this, they often start by subcontracting at least part of the time, and then the question is, are they really running their own business, or are they a self-employed version of the employee that they used to be, albeit working for different people, but with less security? And is that the same as building up your own accounting practice? And I think it's wonderful that with some guidance and support, you recognized that you want to run an accounting practice. You need to run an accounting practice. You're not going to do that just largely subcontracting to a larger firm.
Yeah. And I think the first year I went back into it full time, I obviously had a lot of time, because now I'm not bookkeeping and doing management accounts for other people. So I had a lot of time on my hands, so I could get out there and network. And that 1 year, that was our record growth, with 59% growth in that year. So it was definitely the right decision. But because of that growth, it did make me sick that I hadn't done it 5 years earlier.
Well, it might not have worked 5 years earlier. That's always worth bearing in mind as well. Don't kick yourself too hard. Where did you network? What sort of networking did you do that helped here?
Well, I knew a lot of people, you see, in the trade, because when I was actually in the trade, so I knew a lot of regional managers personally. So all I did networking was I went to a few, what should we say, parties, really. Had a few beers with some regional managers, a few conferences, and that kind of networking in hospitality is a lot of fun. Did the BII, British Institute of Innkeeping, they do 2 parties a year. They call them conferences, but we think of them as parties. And you just go on a table of friends, have a few beers, and everyone starts talking about what you're doing. And of course, I then said, look, I'm back now. I'm coming in full time to Carroll's. Any leads you can give me would be great. So I knew a lot of regional managers, that each of those regional managers would look after 50 to 60 tenants, and all of those tenants would need accountants.
Yeah.
And also they find new tenants. They're the best leads, because they're people just about to start their journey in a pub or a restaurant or a small hotel. So you can really help them, because you've been there, poured your own pints, you've managed your own cellars, you've worked with wine
That's actually what I was
suppliers.
going to. That's what I was going to ask you, Dave, because when I was working with this other client who was hospitality, I mean, I did a bit of desk research, and there are quite a few accounting practices that, the ones where, you look at the sectors and they do every single thing, including hospitality, and you just kind of think, I don't understand how they can bring what is required. I mean, what is it that you bring? You obviously pull pints and that sort of thing, but I think there must be deeper experience that you bring as well. What would you say that is?
Well, because of how old I am, I've gone through a few of the sessions through hospitality trade. The George Osborne Duty Accelerator killed off a few pubs. The smoking ban killed off a few pubs. And I think that experience of struggling through those recessions helps you help clients as well. So, doing weekly cash flows, cash flows is a difficult one for a pub and a restaurant, because they're taking cash on a daily basis. They don't have to wait for their money. But the problem is they then get behind on saving that money for the bills that are coming up. So cash flow is very important for hospitality, because 1 minute they might have a lot of money in the bank, and then they're going to get a bill coming in they haven't paid yet for the beer or the rent or the VAT and that kind of thing. So cash flow is definitely feeding forward and management accounts experience that I've had with hotels as well. And of course, all the key performance indicators of hospitality and being able to benchmark in that industry is invaluable, because somebody might be hitting a GP of 55% and thinking they're doing great. But then you ask them a few questions and you realize actually they should be doing 60%. An accountant who doesn't have hospitality experience wouldn't know. I wouldn't know you said construction industry, Philip. I wouldn't know what their margins are because I don't have any clients in construction, and I don't know. I've never been a builder, so I don't know it. So that's another reason why I think we can really help people, especially the people that are brand new, that are taking on pubs and restaurants for the first ever time. We can help them, and we do a lot of business plans, Philippa, as well for people coming into the trade. And some of the best advice I've given is don't do it. Don't take the plunge. Don't put your house online. Don't, this isn't going to stack up. The rent's not workable. The deal's not good enough, and don't do it. And I've had some people that have come to us, they paid for us to do a business plan, and then because of the advice that we've given them, they've not gone ahead and done it. And I think I've saved a few houses along the way.
I think
because of that,
I'm sure that's a really compelling, when you tell those stories at those networking events and you share those experiences, it's no wonder that you become their first choice for an accountant, because you're speaking their language, you're giving examples that they can relate to, and you're showing you understand where they've come from or where others have fallen down. I'm sure we've all seen those TV shows where people decide, it's Alex Polizzi. I mean, you probably throw your hands up whenever you see one of these things. But the hotel inspector, I think, on Channel 5, and the number of times he goes to see a business that is failing, and then you find out that the people who started it did not have a clue when they started, and they've just been throwing good money after bad. If only they'd had an accountant like you and Carroll accountants, maybe either they wouldn't be there or they'd be in a better place.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry, so I'm getting some really good comments here about there are lots of people who kind of resonate with what you're saying and know about the restaurant trade as well, but also some people who have subcontracted, certainly when they've lost a fairly big client, which you'd said was a bit of a mistake for you because you kept it on too long. But
yeah, that was my biggest mistake. If the accountant firm is watching this now, it was great working for them. And I learned a lot, especially from the senior partner there, the managing partner. He still is my mentor, and it's a great firm. But for me, myself, I just hung on there too long, probably because they were a great firm to work for as well. In fact, my sister actually works for them now. I recommended my sister to them, and my sister works for them.
Wow.
So I mean, if that was great firm.
If that was your biggest mistake, any others that you can think of? You must have had quite a few over the years, pulling pints.
Here's one we all make mistakes on, is price, isn't it? So I spent about a year looking at how we were pricing things. The mentor said to me once, what was my conversion rate? And I was quite confident and said, actually, well, first of all, I asked him what he meant by conversion rate, I've got to say. And when he said, how many leads do you get that you lose? And I said to him, well, actually, Leighton, I said, I don't lose any leads. Every lead I get, they sign up with us. So I suppose I've got 100% conversion rate. And he said, then you must be too cheap. And it kind of resonated with me. I looked at my figures, and I started looking into it and doing a lot of research about what other accountants were charging, and realised that I was the cheapest hospitality specialist accountant out there. So no wonder I wasn't getting any rejections, because my price was the cheapest. So I changed that. We're probably now mid-priced. We're still not the most expensive, but we are mid-priced now. So there was a mistake. I was too cheap for too long. And again, I look at a lot of Facebook group chats, and I see that a lot of people coming into the accountancy industry always talking about price and how they can do it a lot cheaper than what us other accountants are saying they should be doing it for. And they're all the advice that they're given by some of the people that you've already interviewed, Philippa, as well. The same advice I would give, and that is you've got to price right from the start.
Yeah.
Because it's difficult, and I went through that very difficult time of trying to reprice clients that I priced incorrectly to begin with. That's a difficult hill to climb once you start putting your prices up because you were too cheap to begin with. So that's another mistake that I made.
Probably the most common one that we hear on the podcast, and generally I'm in some of those Facebook groups as well. And one of the tips I often share is that if you've got plans to move into an office, factor that into your fees from the start or as early as possible, because if you try to say to clients, I need to put the fees up because I'm now paying for an office, clients are going, well, it's not making any difference to the service I'm getting. Why should I pay anymore? Do it sooner rather than later. Absolutely. What do you think your clients would say? Well, I suppose we've really asked this, so you sort of answered this already. I was going to say, what makes your firm, Carroll's, unique, or at least singles you out so as to attract new clients and keep those you already have? Anything to add to what you've already said in that regard?
The USP, I suppose, the fact that we do business plans for the tied pubco model makes us very unique in that market. So we deal with a lot of tenants that are having to buy their beer from the breweries, let's call them. They're called pub companies, but they once were breweries until Monopoly come along and said they had to split up their monopolies. They all become loads of mushroomed pub companies after that. And now they find a tenant who pays rent and buys the beer from them. So they earn money from rent and beer. So when you're doing a business plan for that model, you've got to know that model. And I've had leases myself in that model. And the other USP is we can also deal with rent reviews. So when it comes up to have a rent review with a tenant, there is a pub code that has been written by the government that what they have to follow, and I know the pub code. So to be able to negotiate a rent with the big boys, the big pub companies, for the tenants, you really need to not only know about the accounts, you need to know about the industry, you need to know about the legal part of it, and you need to know about the agreements that all the different pub companies have. And I've worked with all the main 6 pub companies that are governed by that pub code. So that's probably the USP, Mark, if that's answered the question. I think it's more about what we know about the industry to that level of detail.
That's impressive. What about the stock taking audit thing that you talked about, which we haven't mentioned either? But that sounds pretty good too.
Yes, stock taking. Yes, stock taking is brilliant. I mean, a lot of tenants, when they say, "Oh, we don't need a stock taker because we're running it with family members, we're fine," is because they all think that a stock taker comes along to show you how much is being stolen by customers. That's the image that everyone has of a stock taker. But the stock takers, if they do it right and they're just not bean counters, they don't just come along and count things for you. A proper stock taker can bring your margin, can save you a lot of margin by telling you where to get the best products from, who's selling at what price and where. Waste control on food is a big one. I'll give you an example. Best way to explain about stock taking, I once went to a hotel who had a very, very good, well-known head chef. And they said the head chef wanted to meet me. And I said, great, yeah, let's sit down with the chef. So we sat down with the chef and the owner. And the chef said, look, Dave, I've been in this trade for years. I don't, my margins are very good. And he told me what his margin was. And I said, I don't think you're achieving that. And he said, well, I am. And he showed me his cost cards. How did he, he showed how he plated every meal. And I said, okay, that's great. Do you not have any waste? And he said, I don't waste anything. We make food out of everything. We never waste a thing. And I said, okay, the best thing we could do is, can you follow me? Where's your bins? And I said, what? I said, let's go and have a look at the bins. I went to the bins, opened up the lids and showed them the waste. I went, there you go. There's your waste. So you do waste. There it is. It's in the bin. You wouldn't have 4 bins a week being collected if you didn't waste any food. So you've got to build that into your margin. And that came from my stock taking experience rather than my accountancy experience. Because we have to work with chefs and owners of the business, even when they're using family, to tell them how they can make more money out of regular stock taking. So really, that's where stock taking helped me. And the reason I got qualified as a stock taker, Philippa, is because I had my own pub and I wanted to do my own stocks. And as I was a management accountant, I thought I could do stocks. I run a pub and I'm a management accountant. Surely stocks will be easy. And it gave me a whole load of extra tools that you don't learn from accounting.
That is awesome.
It just gives you more tools in your toolbox.
Dave, I suppose one other thing we should just pick up on is, where are the new clients coming from now? You talked about attending all the industry events 5 years or so ago. Do you still attend those events regularly, or do you just get recommendations and referrals? People search you out, find you online or on LinkedIn or Facebook or anything? Where do your best clients come from these days?
Okay. Yeah. First of all, the networking days. After being diagnosed diabetic, I had to cut down the beer. So those networking days aren't so much fun anymore. But one of the other mistakes I made, and you guys are definitely going to tell me off for this one, is when I had that really good year of growth, 59%, followed by the next year of 40-something%. I thought to myself, I had this really clever idea. I don't need marketing anymore. What's the point? I'm just growing too big. I've not got enough staff. I need to concentrate on my procedures and getting the staff trained up. I turned off every single bit of marketing. I got rid of my Facebook page. I turned off any work on the website. And that was bad. That was a bad move. I should have kept that funnel going. It went down to pretty much zero. So over the last year or so, we've been struggling to get back leads. But to answer your question, Mark, the best leads that we get, we are on the BII accredited panel of experts in licensed trade. So all the pubcos have to go through due diligence process, and the tenants have to complete a business plan, and they have to do it with advice from that panel.
Wow.
So most of the leads that I get now are from that panel, from the BII. So they would say, yeah, in your area, yeah, talk to this guy. And there's about 8, I think it's about 8 of us on that panel in the south. I think there's 20 in the country. And I'm just guessing those numbers. Looking at all the logos, I think I've got that right. There's about 8 in the south. So I'm one of those, or we're one of those. And therefore, when someone's taken on a pub or a restaurant or a hotel, and they have to do one of those business plans because of the pub code, they have to get advice from an accredited hospitality accountant, and that's where most of our leads come from. We get quite a few from there, and of course, like everybody else, we still do referral marketing, and we still do referral fees. So we get referrals as well.
And I'm sure
don't get social media.
No, we do. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are running a sports club, pub, restaurant, hotel, or whatever, who at some point or another feel let down by their current accountant, and they may ask around, or they may just look online, and your credibility, your experience, the ability to add value really comes across in everything that you've said to us today. And I imagine that's also true if somebody looks at your website or your online profile. And if if it doesn't come across in those two places, you want to make sure that it does, because it sounds so compelling.
Yeah. I mean, as always, we've got to go because 30 minutes goes really quickly. But my takeout is that, you're the real deal, basically. And as Mark said, that you can really add value. There's just so much experience and so many stories and so many areas that you bring, not just about the numbers, but you are quite a rounded business person when it comes to hospitality, and I think that's really important. And anybody who's in that sector and they're looking for somebody, I think they should contact you. But and if they are kind of keen to do that, how should they get in touch with you?
The best is email, dave@carrollaccountants.co.uk. Carroll's with 2 R's and 2 L's. They can also phone me on my mobile, which I think is on the website. But most of those numbers on the website will probably come through to my mobile anyway.
Good.
Okay. Thanks ever so much, Dave. That's been brilliant. And Philippa, how can listeners find out more about you and your business Insight 101?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can find me on my website, insight101.co.uk. And a little bit like Dave, who's understood the importance of marketing, that's what I do. So if you don't have a niche or you don't have a USP, which I know Dave does, then I'm very happy to have a chat with you. And equally, if you don't think that USP is coming through on your website and all of your other marketing activities, then that's something I can help with too. So Mark, tell us a little bit about how you can support accountants.
Lovely. Well, thank you. Online everywhere. I'm Bookmark Lee. Even my business card is a bookmark. I tend to support accountants who've been running their own practice a while, but feel they benefit from experienced, non-judgmental sounding board. I had a lovely conversation yesterday with a long-time member of the Sole Practice Club who wanted me to be a sounding board for her plans and options available to her. And she was thrilled at the end of the conversation, the value I provided, and I was delighted and felt very fulfilled from being able to help her like that. And sometimes it's a one-off conversation like that. Some of my clients want a regular, ongoing, monthly, or sometimes more frequent conversations. And I think the accountants value my caring, pragmatic, and commercial approach, and the support that I'm only too happy to share with them. Always happy to have initial conversation without an obligation, expectation, no pushy sales techniques, and no strings either. Also, if we're not yet connected on LinkedIn, if you're listening to this podcast, which obviously you are, you wouldn't hear me saying this, do reach out and connect with me and Philippa on LinkedIn, and maybe follow the podcast page on LinkedIn as well. We've also got a podcast page on Facebook now too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so just before we go, our thanks again to the sponsors of this episode, Pinnacle Global Group, your trusted outsourcing partner. Do check out their website and let their CEO, Mayank, know that you heard about Pinnacle Global on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast.
And thanks to the Tax Advice Network, the easiest way for accountants to reach specialist tax advisors. Remember, there's no charge for using the website findataxadvisor.online, where you can also access their weekly tax tips for general practitioner accountants.
So if you've enjoyed this episode, please share the love online, subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or YouTube, and let us have your feedback directly too. It all helps to potentially broaden the reach of the podcast, and do also please contact either Mark or myself if you'd like to be interviewed on a future podcast. There is a waiting list, but we would love to hear from you.
Yep, thanks so much for that, Philippa. And given I know you're not feeling 100%, I think you coped admirably. And if I hadn't said that, nobody would know. Thanks to also Dave, been a brilliant guest. It's been a delight talking to you and hearing your story today. So until next time on the Accountant Success Secrets podcast, or anywhere else we might meet online or in real life, bye-bye for now.
Bye for now.